Hello, everybody. Welcome to Moment of Clarity. Sorry for the delay. Technical issues yet again. It seems like you just can't put an Assange poster over your shoulder without having endless tech problems. I think it's something to do with the CIA. I'm not sure. But thank you guys for joining me. I have an incredible guest coming up in a couple of minutes here. Medea Benjamin. Most of you probably already know of her amazing work, co-founder of Code Pink and so many wonderful anti-war or pro-peace protests. And so please take a moment to share this. Please let people know to join us. Also, all of the donations, all the super chat donations will be going to people in need right now. Just so you know, and you can donate on the YouTube Super Chat. You can also donate on Venmo. It's at Lee Camp, and all the proceeds are going to those who are struggling through these incredibly difficult times. But let's jump into the interview, and feel free to put up in the comment section questions for Medea. Maybe we'll get to one or two of them, but let's go ahead and get started. Hello, Medea.
Hey, Lee, good to be on with you.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. It's always an honor to speak to you. I just highlighted a study, I guess you did, but an article featuring that study on the endless amount of bombing that has gone on. Let's see if I can put it on the screen real quick.
Well, and let's remember, Lee, we're at the 18th anniversary of the Iraq invasion, so it is a good time to go back and look at how many bombs we've been dropping around the world.
Yes, it seems like it's an anniversary of one war or another every other week. Yes, the article headline was the U.S. and allies dropped 46 bombs per day for 20 years. And it's an excellent article. I highly recommend everybody check it out. I wanted to hear how you went about your research and figuring out just how many bombs the U.S. has dropped.
Well, believe it or not, until the end of the Trump administration, and now unfortunately continuing under Biden, there used to be this thing called the air power summaries that would come out on a regular basis to show how many bombs we dropped in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. So we looked at that for as much as we could get for the last 20 years. Then we had to add in there all the drone strikes that we've been doing in Pakistan, Somalia, and Yemen. And for that, we couldn't rely on any U.S. documents. We had to go to the British group that's been documenting this for a long time, you know, the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. And then on top of that, we had to look at Yemen in particular. And there's a group called the Yemen Data Project that's been documenting the U.S. and allies strikes in Yemen. And then, of course, there was Libya. So we had to go look at that as well. And that is a database that the New America Foundation has. So we had to really scramble to try to find all the different sites where we could get some explanation. And this is, you know, what's out there. We also put in the article that there are things that aren't reported, but it is pretty jaw-dropping when you recognize for the last 20 years, we and our U.S. and our allies have dropped 326,000 bombs, averaging 46 a day, day in and day out, year in and year out for the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible numbers, and it takes a lot of math to add all of that up. Just really gut-wrenching. I mean, a lot of these countries, your average American doesn't even know we've bombed in some of these countries or that we're connected to it. It's just incredible. And of course, the mainstream media, as you well know, fails to cover this type of thing.
Well, I was just thinking today as the anniversary of 18 years of the bombing of Iraq, and I looked at those statistics, and, you know, statistics are pretty meaningless to people, although when I think you put it down to 46 a day, that might have some meaning. But I recalled a woman whose case we brought to the U.S. to try to sue the U.S. government was one of many, many, many thousands of Iraqis who was in a car when her husband was driving, and they came to suddenly to a U.S. checkpoint. And, checkpoints were cropping up all over the place in the early days of the war. And they didn't understand what was being asked of them. They, didn't understand the hand signals, come, stop, do this, do that, and made the wrong moves. And the car was shot up, and her husband and 3 of her children were killed. And so to put those bombings and all that, and the airstrikes don't take into account the on the ground shootings. So you add that up, right, just to think of it more in personal terms, of a woman whose life was forever ruined by the U.S. invasion of Iraq. And then when we traveled to Afghanistan and Yemen, we met so many families who were in the wrong place in the wrong time when there was a U.S. airstrike or a drone strike, again, whose lives were forever destroyed. And it's hard to fathom how much destruction we have caused to people, and of course to our own people, our own soldiers. But it is a time, I think, when we look at almost 2 decades now of a U.S. invasion, to just take a moment to reflect how horrific our actions are on the lives of other people. And as you say, unfortunately, the media, the mainstream media, barely even touches on it.
You've been doing this work, amazing and much needed work, for a long time now. You've seen a lot of administrations come in, some of them claiming they're going to decrease our military or decrease our footprint around the world, or end some, one or more of the wars we got going on. How do you view what's going on now, the change with the Biden administration? How do you view Biden's foreign policy so far?
Well, I think I'm the eternal idiot, because I always think that something's going to be different. I thought Obama was going to be different. I thought maybe Trump really understood how much the public wanted to get out of these wars. And then I thought Biden, okay, he was for the Iran nuclear deal. He didn't want the surge in Afghanistan. He didn't want the invasion of Libya. Maybe he learned something from his terrible decision to support the invasion of Iraq. But here we are, and lo and behold, I'm kind of in shock that the Biden administration didn't, from day one or week one, say, oh yeah, we're going back into the World Health Organization. Let's go back into the Paris Peace Accords. Let's renew the START treaty with Russia. All good things. And then I thought it was going to be, let's go back into the Iran nuclear deal.
Yeah.
The fact that we are today where we are, which I now wonder, is this nuclear deal really going to fall apart, is just astounding to me, because he had the momentum there. It would have worked right in the beginning. And as each day goes by, it's gotten harder and harder to go back into this deal, both from the opposition that's been building up every day in the U.S., as well as the opposition inside Iran.
Yeah, I mean, the anti-Iran propaganda is so pervasive that you have a lot of Americans, turning against having any kind of deal with them, even though it was the U.S. that broke the deal. And now the Biden administration is saying, well, if Iran gets in line, then we might consider it. And as if it wasn't the U.S. that just tore it up. It's amazing.
It's incredible that they should be calling on Iran to do anything. You go back into compliance. Well, hello, the deal is a deal. You broke the deal. Go back into the deal. And it's just preposterous. And I think it is starting to be clear that there is tremendous division inside the Biden administration itself. And unfortunately, it looks like the hardliners within the administration are winning out against the diplomats like Rob Malley, the envoy for Iran, that we were so excited when he was appointed, thinking, well, this guy is a real diplomat. He's going to, work his magic and get us back. Doesn't look that way. And let me add something else on that, Lee, which is, it's bad enough that the Republican Party wants to do everything that it can to make Biden look bad. And they are, super hawks, so they don't want this deal with Iran. But then in the Democrat Party itself, to think this was the signature achievement of the Obama administration, you'd think that they would want to get behind Biden and go back in. But lo and behold, there's a letter that 70 Democrats and 70 Republicans come out with. I mean, where do you get this kind of bipartisan consensus except to bomb countries and destroy relationships? And they come out with a letter saying, it's not good enough to go into this deal. We need it to be broader, more comprehensive. We need to deal with Iran's missiles. We need to deal with their malign activities in the region, their human rights issues, like throw everything into it, knowing that means you never have a deal. And now Menendez is going to come out with a similar one in the Senate, and it's just awful.
Yeah, I mean, it really is terrible. And then on top of that, you have there were these brief moments where Trump, for all the wrong reasons, for his own ego or whatever else, threatened peace a little bit here and there. He wanted to bring some troops out home from Afghanistan and Germany, and each time he was thwarted. And in fact, just this week, the Gray Zone came out with some reporting and internal information about how the Pentagon successfully thwarted Trump's demand that they bring home troops from Afghanistan. And then Biden gets in and, of course, cuts off all of that withdrawal so that the troops do not return to the United States. I often feel like it seems like Congress has just completely ceded any control over the military. And there's, to some degree, even the presidency doesn't seem that effective in control over the military. Not that these presidents are peaceniks or anything, but, in the few occasions where Trump, tried to create peace with North Korea or something, none of it happens.
Well, that's right. And I think that piece in the Gray Zone by Gareth Porter was fantastic because it really shows why it's so difficult to do something like bring troops home. And then you have to look at the larger thing of, not only the military itself being part of the keep the war going status quo, but all the other elements that make money off of these wars, and how difficult it is to say, wow, 20 years, you think we should try something else? Let the Afghans figure out their future. It's so hard to do. And there we have a May 1st deadline that was negotiated under Trump. And now it's pretty clear that Biden isn't going to stick to that either. So, you bring up Congress. Well, on one hand, Congress, according to the Constitution, is supposed to be the ones that deal with these wars. And there is a big effort now to repeal these authorizations for the use of military force that date back to 2001 and 2002 that have been used ever since that. But then you also got to think, I don't know, the way Congress is, do we want them to be the ones in control? Because they're so hawkish as well. You go to any of these hearings, and I can't go to them anymore because of COVID, but we used to go and make a fuss. But now I watch it online, and I'm watching online saying, no, because you hear the kind of questioning, even for the confirmation hearings that have been going on. The Congress is so hawkish. It's unbelievable, with the exception of, maybe a dozen of our more peaceful allies in Congress. The majority of them are incredible hawks.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that it's largely been bought out by big money interests that are all for the immense profit that comes from war and taking over the resources of other countries. You mentioned how you used to go to these hearings and cause a ruckus. I wanted to ask about kind of your theory of change. You have done an impressive job of interrupting a lot of these hearings and showing that there is actual real and on the ground anger about these actions done by Congress. But you also are involved in, or have been involved in, across your career, many different types of trying to create change, whether it's petitions online or marches, or you of course support voting, and so I'm wondering if do you think one of those is more important, or is it kind of just all the efforts that can be used?
Well, I also ran as a Green Party candidate for Congress. I also support the People's Party. I believe that our two-party system is absolutely broken. So you got to try all the different ways that you can. And I think the hardest thing to change is this military, industrial, congressional, security, academic, think tank, blah, 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 blah caucus, because it is so incredibly powerful. So we've got to use all the tools that we can. And I believe that we have to work Congress because it's what we have. We created this thing called Code Pink Congress every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. We meet and we discuss a particular issue. We oftentimes bring on a congressperson, and then we take action at the end of the call where we get like 200 people and we start calling Congress. Well, I believe you have to do that and make relationships with people in Congress, but I also believe you can't use those relationships as an excuse to say, I'm not going to go in and make a ruckus. Because you have to do that as well. When we could, we would sit in their offices. We would do die-ins in their offices. We would get arrested in their offices. We'd go to their homes. Whatever we can do to get them to feel the intense passion that we have about these issues and how wrong they are in the choices that they're making. And, you know, it's not just wars now, as you well know, Lee, it's all of these incredibly brutal sanctions. And when, you know, I think of the people who are suffering, so many countries, whether it's Syria or Iran or Venezuela or Cuba or North Korea, ordinary people, millions and millions and millions of ordinary people suffering from this imperial hubris that says that we can not only say to our own companies, you can't trade, but we want to say to the entire world. It is just devastating, and my heart breaks to just recognize how much suffering we cause, not only from the bombs and the bullets, but also from these sanctions.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that economic war can be as brutal, if not worse, sometimes than the bombing we are involved in.
And during a pandemic.
Yeah. Well, that too. And now we're doing our best to use the vaccine as a weapon. It came out that Pfizer was working with our government to basically demand things of other countries, such as military bases, in order to give them vaccine, which is, of course, morally repulsive as well. I wanted to ask, you wrote a great book on Saudi Arabia as well and our relationship with them. I wanted to ask your view on Biden's announcement that we would cease, helping Saudi Arabia attack Yemen, but they didn't really clarify what that meant. Whether that would mean we'd stop helping with the blockades, which seem to be one of the most harmful things, and whether we'd stop selling arms to Saudi Arabia, which I highly doubt. So I wanted to get your view.
Yeah, well, that goes back to your issue about who's really in charge, because, at one point Biden said during the campaign that he doesn't see anything positive in our relationship with Saudi Arabia, and it should be a pariah state. And he came in and he did do a good thing saying that we're going to stop selling offensive weapons. But then when us and members of Congress, us in the peace movement, said, okay, could you tell us what that actually means? What are offensive weapons? What are defensive weapons? And what other steps are you going to take to stop supporting this war? No response. And then on top of that, the envoy that he appointed for Yemen is this guy, Tim Lender King, who we call Lying King, who has denied that the Saudis even have a blockade on Yemen that's keeping fuel from getting into the country, which means it's keeping food and medicines from getting around the country. And when a very brave CNN reporter actually snuck into Yemen and got the proof, he said, who are you going to believe, me or your eyes? So, it's been terrible that we haven't been able to get him to be follow through on his instinct of calling Saudi Arabia a pariah state, because the rest of the people in the administration have said to him, hey, wait a minute, Biden, this relationship is way too important. We make too much money from selling weapons to the Saudis. We need them in our campaign to support Israel and Saudi Arabia against Iran and blah, blah, blah. But whatever it is, I think he takes half measures, but is afraid to go all the way, because then that really means changing the geopolitics, and he's not ready to do that.
Yeah, I mean, yet again, it seems like sometimes politicians will make statements or say they're going to do something, and then they feel the economic pressure from the powerful interests, and all of a sudden they do an about face.
Well, and let's recognize that Saudi Arabia became, from the time of Obama, the #1 purchaser of U.S. weapons in the world. It's quite remarkable. It's a small country. It just has spent an enormous amount of its petrodollars on weapons. And then once you sell all these weapons, well, they'll use these weapons. And it was under Obama that the U.S. first got involved in supporting the Saudis in their war in Yemen. Of course, it was amped up during Trump's time. But that gives us an example of how there is a consensus between the two parties that war and supporting dictatorships is okay when they're our friends.
I know you are always up to date on what's going on with Cuba. I went on one of the amazing Code Pink trips to Cuba with you. Well, I haven't heard too much. I know Biden hasn't been running around saying we're going to ease tensions again. But I'm wondering, are there any steps on Cuba, and what's going on with their militarized crickets? Are they going to use those against us?
Well, there's almost no talk from the Biden administration in terms of improving relations. There are some efforts coming from Congress. There was just a letter from Congressman Bobby Rush that we got 80 members of Congress to sign on to, saying we want to normalize relations. Senator Wyden has a bill calling for the normalizing of trade relations. There's a lot of U.S. businesses that would like to trade with Cuba, even though it's a small country with a small economy. They do import a lot of food and a lot of other things from, unfortunately, becoming more and more difficult. Can't import from the United States now. So in the Chamber of Commerce and the agriculture world, there are a lot of businesses pushing for normalizing relations. But the Biden administration is listening to this small group of Cuban Americans in Florida that say, keep the chokehold on, tighten it further. And Lee, I just want your listeners to think for a minute, your viewers, how can you as a Cuban American say you care about your relatives in Cuba when now, according to U.S. restrictions, you can't send money to them anymore? You can't go and visit them because there are no planes that go anywhere except Havana. They can't have, you can't get money for them to start their own businesses. Wouldn't you feel sorry for your own relatives and want to be able to help them? And wouldn't that mean you'd want more normal relations? But now you have this very mean-spirited group of Cuban Americans who have a stranglehold over U.S. policy there. And it means that the U.S. hasn't even rolled back restrictions on travel, on trade, and not even taken Cuba off this ridiculous list of state sponsors of terrorism, which is just crazy. I mean,
there's no evidence. There's no evidence whatsoever, unless they're talking about sending doctors around the world.
Exactly. I was saying the only people exported by Cuba are doctors to help people all around the world.
Yeah, totally ridiculous. And then the Democrats and Biden continue also to go along with the let's create a coup in Venezuela. Let's call them a narco-terrorist state. Let's pretend that Juan Guaido is the president when he's never gotten a single vote for the presidency. I mean, it's just garbage on that front.
Let's keep strangling them with sanctions and then turn around and say how horrible socialism is and how all these people are going hungry. it is, and then Biden just gave temporary protective status to hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans in this country. And eventually, when they get the right to vote, that will create more of a right-wing voting bloc to be against any progressive, socialist countries in Latin America. And now that Lula is out of jail in Brazil and will probably run for president again, we might see a whole new change in Latin America. And we need to have the U.S. take a stand of non-intervention, what we at Code Pink have been calling a new good neighbor policy that is one of mutual respect. But I don't see it coming from this Biden administration, and certainly not until the left is stronger in Latin America.
Well, speaking of a stronger left, Code Pink has been kind of one of the shining stars of anti-war protest and movement in the U.S. But obviously, it'd be great if Code Pink kept getting bigger endlessly, and if there were many other organizations. What are your thoughts on the anti-war movement in the U.S.?
Well, it's a pathetic movement, and I say this as somebody who's dedicated just about every day of my life since I was in high school, and that was a long time ago, to try and end war. And we've had ups and downs as a movement, but ever since Barack Obama came in, the movement really fell apart. And it's also the shrewdness of the way wars are fought now. So you don't have a lot of Americans dying. You have these air wars that we talked about. You have these endless wars. So the young generation doesn't know anything except, we've been in wars my whole life. It's nothing new. It's kind of ho-hum. And then there's so much to do for people who want to be activists. There's so many issues here at home. And so a lot of the best activists are involved in all these very, very critical issues, from the climate to racism to inequality, gun issues.
But those things are intertwined, though. Absolutely, right? I mean,
they're intertwined. And when you look at the agreement that we have that U.S. should end these endless wars, it's the majority of Americans, majority Republicans as well. But getting people out on the street. Of course, now we've been a year inside our homes and there hasn't been a lot of street protests at all. But we just did one at a very spontaneous one at the offices of the guy in Annapolis who initiated this terrible letter against the U.S. going into the Iran nuclear deal. And we got out maybe 35 people. So that's about what we can do at this point. We can't get out hundreds of people. It's very difficult to manifest the opposition that the American people have into street kind of protests these days. And, now as it gets easier with more people vaccinated and hopefully seeing an end in sight to COVID, we do have to build up the anti-war movement. And as you said, they're all related. And so we have been making a lot of good connections during this COVID time with the Poor People's Campaign, with the Movement for Black Lives, with environmental groups. And I think that we'll be in a better position to be showing more strength as an anti-war movement. But it is a tough thing when the majority of people don't even see these wars anymore, much less know what the U.S. involvement is in them. For example, on Yemen, I don't think people even have any idea that the bombs being dropped and the blockade by the Saudis has so much U.S. complicity. Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough for being tireless and doing so much to try and end these wars. We're coming up on maybe the last couple of minutes. What topic did I not ask you about that you are on top of?
Well, there's Russia and China.
Of course, those two small countries.
And the Pentagon budget. Yeah, Russia and China. I mean, just to see the horrific lack of diplomacy from Anthony Blinken in his first meeting with high-level representatives from China.
Today, it's all collapsing, right?
Oh my God, at each other's throats. And, the U.S. trying to preach to the Chinese about human rights, and the Chinese coming back and saying, I don't think you should talk to us about human rights without looking back into your own country. And then the Cold War with Russia, and Biden calling Putin a killer, which is not exactly helpful if you want to have move towards diplomacy. And so I'm very worried about this Cold War. In fact, Code Pink is helping to organize for next week protests around the country, and let's see how many people we can get out. And maybe we do, because it's against a war with China and more confrontation with China, as well as the hate crimes against Asian Americans. And those things are very intertwined. So I think we'll get a lot of people out for those, and people can go to the Code Pink website, codepink.org, to find out more about that. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is the Pentagon budget, because here we have these Cold Wars brewing and heating up, and they justify more modern high-tech weapons. Mm-hmm. And that means we don't get a chance to ever have a shift from the money in the Pentagon to the things that we really need, whether it's healthcare or green jobs or, actually doing things that would help people overseas instead of bombing them.
And the Air Force, higher up in the Air Force, basically admitted the F-35 is a disaster. I mean, they're looking into purchasing other jets because they've spent $1 trillion on this thing.
$1 trillion, and then we're going to spend $1 trillion to modernize our nuclear weapons, while we tell Iran it can't have one nuclear weapon. We want to modernize our entire stockpile of nuclear weapons. So I think that there is energy to shift the money from the Pentagon to other needs. And we're working a lot with Congress on this. We're getting local communities involved in this. And I think today, when people understand that the biggest threats we face are not things that can be dealt with through the military, there is more and more support to move the money from the Pentagon into real needs for the planet and the humans.
Well, Medea, thank you so much for your time. I want to recommend that everybody read your books. They're also excellent. What's the best way for people to find all of your stuff and keep up with what you're doing?
Well, the best way is to go on to the Code Pink website or follow me, Medea Benjamin, on either Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. But I would just want to put one final plug in to people who are concerned about these issues to join us on Tuesday evenings, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, on what is called Code Pink Congress. So if you go to the website and you look for Code Pink Congress and sign up there, every week is a different issue. We had Burma last week. We have Saudi Arabia. We have Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, all kinds of great issues. And we need more and more people to join us in that, because at the end of each call, we actually take actions. We call Congress, we email them, we contact U.S. companies. It's a great example of learning something and then doing something about it right at the same time.
Well, and that's so important because it shows, especially those who are new to activism, new to making their voice heard in that way, that there are actions that can be taken every day, every week. Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough.
Great. Nice being on with you, Lee.
Talk soon. All right. That was Medea Benjamin, co-founder of Code Pink. And probably almost none of you are unfamiliar. So meaning all of you are familiar with Code Pink. But if there's anyone out there who's not, probably most of the times you've seen protests that have been front and center at our Capitol buildings, at the White House, inside the halls of Congress. The vast majority of them are connected to Code Pink because they do such incredible work on that front. But thank you guys so much for joining us. Like I said, all of the proceeds are going to people in need. We talk more about that, who it's going to, and things like that on the weekend live streams. And if you are in need and you think $50 or $100 would really help you get to the next paycheck, or fight off an eviction or something, then you can email commoncensored@protonmail.com. That's the name of my podcast with Eleanor Goldfield. Also, something to know is all of this video that you're watching right now, it's all also audio. It's a podcast called Moment of Clarity, and that will have all of my interviews every week. It has all of Redacted Tonight, and so it comes out twice a week, I believe. Most weeks we're switching the number. It's not that I don't know when my podcast comes out, but it's now twice a week. And anyway, it's called Moment of Clarity. You can get it for free. So if you're not able to join us on the live stream, join us, for the video, you can do that from the podcast platform. Moment of Clarity is the name of the podcast. All right, guys. I also have a new Redacted Tonight coming out tonight. Hope you'll check it out. Endlessly pumping out content for you guys. I really appreciate you being here. And what else I got for you? I don't know. I guess just keep fighting. And I'll see you on Redacted Tonight at about 8 p.m. tonight. You can watch the opening monologue at youtube.com/redacted tonight, but you can watch the full show at portable.tv. And I'll also be sending out an email with it later. So if you want to join the email list, you can do that at leecamp.com. Keep fighting, everybody.